They lied to you about the first president. John Hanson led America before Washington, but his name was erased. Why? Because Washington wasn't elected to govern. He was chosen to seal something beneath the Capitol, a vault no one was supposed to open until now. Franklin left behind a secret calendar. It ends in 2025, and beneath the Capitol dome, something ancient is waking up. Every president was part of a ritual. Every oath, a lock. The next one isn't an election, it's a summoning. What they buried in 1793 is listening, and this time, it's going to reply. Stay with us if you want to know what happens when the eye opens. And don't forget to subscribe before they pull this video. George Washington wasn't the first president. They just needed you to believe he was. What if I told you that everything you know about America's beginnings, about its revolution, its constitution, its first president, is a carefully constructed illusion? Not a mistake, a deliberate erasure. His name was John Hanson, and he was the first man to lead the United States under a ratified government, not George Washington. But you've never heard of him. You won't find him on the dollar bill. His face isn't carved into a mountain. There's no holiday in his name. Why? Because the country you think you live in didn't start in 1776. It started in 1789, and everything before that was quietly buried. They fed you the fairy tale. We fought for freedom. We signed the Declaration. We elected Washington. Boom, America. But the truth is darker. The United States already had a president before Washington, a functioning government, a national army, and a capital. So why erase it? Because the first version of America failed, and failure doesn't fit the narrative. The secret presidency of John Hanson, March 1st, 1781. The Articles of Confederation are ratified. For the first time, the 13 colonies are bound by a national constitution. This is not a theory. This is congressional record. Under those articles, a new government is formed. The United States in Congress assembled. And its first president? John Hanson. He was unanimously elected. He served a full term. He signed national documents. He commanded troops. He negotiated with foreign powers. And he was addressed, officially, as President of the United States. 7 men held this office before Washington ever swore the oath. Hanson was the first, and yet, no statue, no textbooks, no memory, just silence. So who deleted him, and why? Because John Hanson represented a version of America that didn't serve the system. A decentralized republic, no central bank, no executive power with monarchic flair. 13 sovereign states united loosely under mutual protection. Sound familiar? It should, because it's exactly what many Americans are still calling for today. Which makes Hanson dangerous. He was a blueprint, a prototype of an America that didn't bow to a central throne. So when the Constitution of 1787 came into play, Hanson had to vanish. Not with violence, not with scandal, with silence. What they don't teach you in school, go back. Look closely. Between 1781 and 1789, there were 8 men who held the title President of the United States in Congress assembled. Not presidents of companies, not state governors, not local leaders, presidents, national, elected. The official congressional record lists them. Their names are there: Hanson, Boudinot, Mifflin, Lee, Gorham, St. Clair, Griffin, Cyrus Griffin, the last before Washington. So why doesn't anyone know? Because in 1789, they hit delete. The Constitution replaced the Articles. The country got a new start, and George Washington, symbol of unity, war hero, elite landowner, became the palatable icon. He was easier to sell, easier to worship, easier to mold into legend. The myth of first. Ask yourself this: why does every child in America know George Washington chopped down a cherry tree? A story we now know is completely fabricated, but none know the name John Hanson. Why was a lie immortalized and a truth erased? Because myth is more powerful than fact. And in America, myth is policy. Washington wasn't the first. He was the restart, a reset designed to clean the slate and lock the past away behind 7 seals. And it worked. For 234 years, it worked. Until now. The real founding father had no wig, no war medals, just a pen. John Hanson was not a military man. He didn't own slaves. He didn't inherit an empire. He was a printer, a merchant, a man of the people, chosen unanimously to lead a country still bleeding from revolution. And he accepted the presidency knowing it would come with no glory. No marble tomb, no farewell address, just duty, and then obscurity. They needed you to forget him, because his legacy doesn't serve the narrative of centralized power. He was the face of something they couldn't control, so they erased the face. But here's where it gets darker. There's a letter, locked in a library in Annapolis, Maryland. Written in 1783, it's from Hanson, addressed to Thomas Jefferson. The ink is faded. The signature is trembling. In it, Hanson warns of something. A shift, a restructuring, a betrayal. He writes, "The union we have bled to forge will not last, for they speak of constitution, but they mean empire." That letter never made it to public archives. It was found in a private collection in 1972 and quietly locked away again. No mention in history books, no academic reviews, just a footnote in a private university's restricted index. Because if that letter is real, then the Constitution wasn't a continuation. It was a coup. Do you want to know what happened to Hanson after he left office? What really happened? Why his burial site is still debated? Why there's no verified portrait? Why his descendants were threatened into silence? We'll get there, but not yet. Because first, you need to understand who rewrote the story and what else they erased with it. And that starts with Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin's other life. The one you were never meant to know. They called him a polymath, inventor, diplomat, founding father. But there's one title they never speak aloud. Architect of control. Because while you were taught about lightning rods and bifocals, Franklin was building something else. A network, a ritual, a veil. The kind of system that doesn't protect freedom. It manufactures the illusion of it. And he started with the most sacred of all myths. The Constitution. The London basement. They never investigated. An unassuming house in the heart of Westminster, once owned by Benjamin Franklin himself. Renovation workers break through a false wall in the basement. Behind it, 15 human skeletons, men, women, children. The bones are over 200 years old, arranged in ritualistic fashion. Some show signs of surgical experimentation, others of something darker. Official explanation? Medical research. Dismissed. Forgotten. But one of the workers made photos. They leaked, briefly, onto the early internet, and then vanished. One of the skulls had a copper spike driven through the cranium. Another, a jaw missing entirely, but with no trauma, as if removed surgically while the subject was still breathing. What was Franklin doing in that house? And why was his basement full of silent witnesses? Franklin's Hellfire Diary, the red journal that never left. France. Franklin returns from Paris with a locked journal, bound in red calfskin. Only 2 people are known to have seen it. One, his assistant, Temple Franklin. The other, a Jesuit archivist who recorded only this phrase: "Inside are names that do not exist, but control everything." The journal is missing. The family denies it ever existed, but references to a livre rouge appear in private letters between Adams and Jefferson. Jefferson writes, Franklin speaks now of plans within plans, of a government above ours. I begin to fear he does not mean it metaphorically. So what were those plans? Enter the Committee of Nine. According to declassified correspondence from the Library of Congress, letters once considered fraudulent, but now partially verified by watermark and handwriting analysis, Franklin was a member of a shadow council during the final years of the Revolution. They called themselves the Nine. Not Masons, not elected, not even American. 9 men from across the Atlantic world, each tied to ancient guilds, pre-Vatican libraries, and institutions older than monarchy. Their goal, not liberty, not democracy, continuity. They believed that power must remain concentrated, regardless of flag or king. And the only way to ensure that was through design. The Constitution, they believed, should not be a framework of freedom. It should be an engine of obedience. Hidden structures, hidden intentions. Ever wonder why Washington, D.C. is laid out with such strange angles? Why the Capitol, the Washington Monument, and the White House form a perfect triangle? Not of geography, but of ritual geometry. Franklin did that. He oversaw the layout. He chose the coordinates, and if you overlay them on the map of Solomon's Temple, the pattern is identical. Coincidence? Not according to the recovered Masonic blueprints from the Grand Lodge of France. Dated 1786, the architecture of America was designed not to reflect power, but to direct it. Lines of influence, wards of containment, power sinks, like stone acupuncture needles driving obedience into the land. And who controls the points? Controls the current. Why Hansen had to go? John Hansen stood in the way. He believed in distributed sovereignty. He wanted every state to act as its own authority. He spoke openly against Franklin's proposals for a central treasury, a permanent executive, and a federal army. He wrote, "To replace the tyrant king with a tyrant committee is no freedom at all." And then 1 year later, he disappeared from history. His letters stopped. His portrait was never completed. His burial, unverified. And the most chilling, his only surviving personal diary, once held by a Maryland archive, was burned in 1872. Official reason? Mildew damage. But the curator's final logged note says, several pages reference a group called the Nine. One entry, BF, warns me not to interfere. Says the nation is not ours, but theirs. The Constitution as a ritual document, take a closer look. Why does the preamble begin with, "We the people"? A phrase that appears nowhere else in the document. Because "we the people" isn't a legal term. It's a sigil, a declaration of consent, designed to bind not with laws, but with belief. Every signer of the Constitution placed their name under a set of arcane symbols. Tiny flourishes that, when mirrored and layered, form a glyph nearly identical to a Sumerian control rune. Impossible? One researcher from Princeton created a 3D overlay in 2009. The results were quietly suppressed. He resigned the next month. His findings were never published, but his notes survived online for 48 hours. I've read them. They say, this is not a document of governance. It's a containment grid, and those who sign it are not leaders, they are anchors. And now we come to the present. Ask yourself, why is Washington worshipped while Hansen is deleted? Why is Franklin on the $100 bill, the only founding father never to become president? Because he never needed to be president. He was the one designing the presidency. And George Washington? He was the mask, the front-facing idol, a soldier sculpted into godhood to keep your eyes off the architects behind the throne. What else don't you know? What's buried beneath Independence Hall? Why does the Library of Congress have a sealed vault with unclassified but unreadable entries? Why did every member of the Nine vanish from record after 1791? Do you want to go deeper? Next, we uncover what happened the night before Washington's inauguration. and the ritual that no one was supposed to witness. The night before the presidency, and the ceremony that never made it to the history books. April 29th, 1789. New York City. The sky hangs low with storm clouds, but no rain falls. Just a wind, dry, electric, unnatural. Inside a small chamber below Federal Hall, 9 men gather. They do not speak. They form a circle. At the center, George Washington, eyes closed, hands outstretched, his uniform replaced by a robe of deep navy, trimmed in copper thread. This is not the swearing-in ceremony. This is the night before, and it was never meant to be remembered. The unrecorded oath, there is a document, sealed in the Washington Masonic Memorial. It bears no title, no signatures, just a single phrase etched into aged parchment. 1 to bear the shape, 8 to bind the will. Multiple historians have dismissed it as metaphor, a poetic flourish. But one researcher, Dr. Elias Channer, believed otherwise. He matched the phrasing to a forgotten oath in the archives of the Royal Arch Masons in York, England. The vessel shall carry the mark of unity, but unity shall be kept by the unseen. What does it mean that the president is not the ruler? He is the symbol, the vessel. The shell, power, true power, is distributed elsewhere, out of view, by design. The man in the black veil eyewitness records are rare, but a single private letter, written by an aide named Jonathan Millet, tells of a man unknown to any among the generals, dressed in foreign garb, bearing a black veil over his head, who spoke a tongue none translated. This man arrived at the hall hours before dawn. He entered alone, and when he emerged, Washington's demeanor had changed. Millet writes, he was still George, but something in him had gone still, like a statue of himself, like he was no longer thinking, but waiting. The man in the black veil was never seen again, but symbols found etched into the stone where he stood. Beneath the main floor, match symbols carved into the ruins of Göbekli Tepe. This was not politics. It was not tradition. It was a ritual of transfer. The president as a seal, not a king. In the hours before Washington was officially sworn in, 3 events occurred that have never appeared in mainstream history. A small group of Franklin's inner circle placed a copper sphere beneath the speaker's chair, a device reportedly containing mercury, quartz, and a strip of parchment. No record exists of its removal. A box, bound in black cloth and locked with 7 latches, was brought in and placed under the inaugural platform. Some believe it was buried with Washington. Others say it was passed from president to president, each adding a page to the contents. A final letter, written by Hansen but never sent, was burned during the pre-dawn hour. Only a fragment survives, smuggled out by a servant. He does not know. He carries it unknowingly. That is what makes him useful. Washington's silence. In every other respect, Washington was a man of notes. Meticulous, observant, detailed, but there is no diary entry for April 29th, 1789. Only a blank page. Then, on the 30th, the official inauguration, his writing returns. Calm, controlled, as if nothing had happened. He never spoke of the night before, never referenced it, never acknowledged any deviation from the public record. But others did. The obsidian ring. Thomas Paine, radical pamphleteer and thorn in the side of every power structure, once wrote a cryptic accusation in a letter to Samuel Adams. He bears the ring, but not the choice. He swore to something no man should swear to. What ring? In 1802, Washington's personal effects were catalogued. Among them was an obsidian signet, unmarked, not worn, not listed in any previous inventories. It was stored in a side drawer, wrapped in silk. Its origin, unknown. Its purpose, never disclosed. And then it vanished. The archivist who logged it resigned the same year. No explanation, no interview, just silence. The keeper's ledger, years later, in 1867, a coded ledger was found hidden behind a false panel in the Library of Congress. It lists names, not of presidents, but of keepers, one for every administration. Each name is marked with 2 dates, an inauguration and a second, earlier date, always the night before. The night of transfer, that ledger was removed from public view, not because it was debunked, but because it had not yet been explained. America was never a democracy. It was an equation. From the beginning, the system wasn't built to give power to the people. It was designed to manage them. The Constitution wasn't a declaration. It was a container. Each president a placeholder, each oath a renewal, each inauguration a seal. That's why Hansen had to be erased. He remembered too much. He came from a version of America that couldn't be controlled. And that's why Franklin placed Washington where he did, not as ruler, but as lock. You can feel it, can't you? The artificial calm, the sense that something beneath the surface is watching, guiding, filtering, controlling. You weren't paranoid. You were sensing the design, and now that design is cracking because the story is no longer fully under control. The archives are leaking. The descendants of the Nine are dying without heirs. The symbols are repeating, and you're not supposed to see them. Do you want to know what connects all the presidents? What ritual still continues every 4 years, out of public sight, before every televised ceremony? Do you want to know what was buried beneath the Capitol dome before it was even built? The root beneath the dome. What they buried before the Capitol was built. In 1793, the ground where the United States Capitol now stands was nothing but raw earth and dust. The construction was ceremonial. George Washington himself laid the cornerstone, but before the stone, something else was placed. Not building materials, not relics, something older, something alive. The box that came from Monticello. A cart arrived 2 nights before the cornerstone ceremony. It was unmarked, covered in a tarp, escorted by armed men, none of whom were in uniform. The box inside was made of black walnut and copper. On its surface, no markings, but every man who approached it would later report the same sensation. A low vibration in the chest, a weight behind the eyes, a sound you couldn't hear, but couldn't unhear. It had been delivered from Monticello, from Jefferson, and he never spoke of it again. The right, beneath the earth. Only 9 men were present when it was buried. Franklin was not one of them. He had already retired to Philadelphia, but records show he paid an unnamed courier 3 times the normal fee to deliver a single envelope, addressed only for the vault. The contents of that envelope were never recorded, but a letter from Thomas Jefferson, discovered decades later in a Parisian archive, ends with a cryptic line. The dome shall stand atop the eye, and the eye shall not blink. The copper-lined cavity was sealed. The cornerstone laid over it. The ceremony began. None of the participants mentioned what came before. The dome is an antenna, look up. You've seen it 1,000 times. The U.S. Capitol Dome. White, majestic, symbol of liberty. But it's not decorative. It's not even architectural. It's functional. Built in cast iron, reinforced with copper. Its inner geometry mirrors a resonant cavity oscillator, a design used today in particle accelerators and certain classified communication tech. In other words, it's transmitting something. But transmitting what? And to where? The presidents are the keys. Each president is sworn in facing the Capitol. Each repeats the oath. Each lays a hand on a text. But behind closed doors, a second object is introduced. It's never photographed, never described, but mentioned in passing by 3 different aides across 3 administrations. One called it the lens, another the receiver, The third, under Clinton, called it a wait, like a question you haven't asked, but already know the answer to. No president speaks of it, but their eyes change after the meeting. Go back, watch the footage. Before inauguration, nervous, human, unpredictable. After, calm, composed, hollow. The dream that repeats. Multiple presidents have described a recurring dream, never publicly, always in letters or to aides. I'm in a room without windows. I see the Capitol above me, through stone. I hear my own voice, but it's not speaking words, and there's something behind me, breathing. Truman spoke of it. Nixon called it the Dark Gallery. Obama, in an offhand remark to his physician, described that dream again with the breathing thing. Why do they all dream the same thing? Because they're connected. The chain of custody. There's a reason presidents age faster than any other leaders. Not from stress, not from pressure, from exposure. The object buried beneath the Capitol is not inert. It pulses, it reaches, and every president is a node in the network. Not a ruler, not even a leader, a conduit. They don't govern. They translate. From what? No one alive knows. Or if they do, they've chosen not to say. The diagram that shouldn't exist. In 1961, an unnamed technician at the National Geodetic Survey leaked a topographic anomaly beneath the Capitol grounds. It showed a perfect, unnatural cavity, concentric with no geological justification. He was silenced, his report shredded, but one page survived. It showed a diagram, labeled R. Moore 9 depth 33 symbol Graph I. That diagram was digitally enhanced in 2007, and the pattern it matched, a Neolithic chamber beneath the Orkney Isles, a chamber built 5,000 years ago, for a purpose no one could explain, until now. The bloodline protocol. Presidents aren't just elected, they're selected. There's a pattern in their lineage. Genetic links across time. From Washington to Bush, from Obama to Lincoln, not in names, but in markers. Rare mitochondrial sequences, shared neurological response patterns, a susceptibility to low-frequency influence. Why else do you think every candidate is pre-screened, pre-tested, pre-selected before they're ever introduced to the public? Elections aren't choices, they're confirmations. You're not choosing the leader. You're agreeing to the continuation of the signal. So what's the signal? We don't know. Not yet. But every record points to one terrifying possibility. The object beneath the Capitol isn't transmitting. It's receiving, waiting for a reply. From where or from who, no one can say. But the oldest records, the ones written in cipher and stored in Masonic vaults, all end the same way. When the eye opens, the Republic ends, and something older returns. Do you want to know when it opens? Do you want to know the real purpose behind the 2025 presidential transition? Do you want to know who's already trying to unseal the vault? The date was set in 1789, and 2025 is not an election. It's a ritual. They always knew it would come back, that the signal beneath the Capitol would one day be heard, that the cycle, once closed, would begin again. And that day was calculated centuries ago, not by a prophet, not by a president, but by Franklin himself, hidden in his coded journals now held in restricted archives at the American Philosophical Society, is a calendar. It spans 246 years. It ends in 2025. The final transmission December 20th, 2024. Deep within Mount Weather, an underground government facility not far from Washington, an anomalous pulse was recorded. The frequency was 17.11 hertz, a frequency not used in any known government or military band. But when overlaid against the acoustic geometry of the Capitol dome, it matched perfectly. And then, For 3.7 seconds, all encrypted presidential communications went dark. They said it was a system test, but a technician at NORAD leaked a fragment of the incident log. Primary node, sync, echo pattern. Received source, unknown direction. Downward, downward, not outward, not celestial, not from the sky, from beneath. The vault is opening. There's movement now under the Capitol. Construction maintenance that started without public notice. No official permits filed, no public records, but footage exists, recorded on a cell phone by a night worker. Steel shipped in at 3 a.m., personnel wearing unmarked uniforms, ground-penetrating radar equipment deployed, pointed downward under the rotunda. And the most disturbing? A machine, shaped like a gimbal, rotating in precise intervals. Every 11 seconds, exactly 9 times, then reset, and on the inner core, a symbol, the eye, the same one that's printed on every dollar bill, except this time, it's not flat. It's raised, embossed, pressed outward, as if trying to come through. The 2025 election is already decided not by votes, not by parties, by lineage, because the candidate chosen to win has the marker. A genetic anomaly traced through 17 generations, from the Plantagenets, through the Scottish Rite, through Virginia, to now. And the terrifying part, he doesn't know. He believes he's running a campaign, but he's being guided, speechwriters embedded with handlers, advisors with no public record, security that doesn't report to Secret Service. And every night, his dreams repeat. A room with no windows, stone overhead, breathing behind him. What's in the vault? Fragments recovered from pre-constitutional correspondences describe it only as the anchor, not a weapon, not a relic, an entity, not alive in our sense, but aware, awake, waiting, described in one letter as a presence that writes not with ink, but with thought, that speaks without words, that sees only when seen. It has waited beneath 45 presidencies, each one a lock, each oath a chain, and now the final link is rusting. The sequence of 9. In Franklin's diary, there's a symbol, a spiral of 9 turns, each labeled with initials. Every president matched one. Even those who served twice filled the same slot. But 2025, the spiral closes, and the space at the center, the 0 position, is labeled not with initials, but with a glyph that also appears in the ruins beneath the Temple of Enki in Eridu, and on the door to the Capitol Vault, the only 2 places on Earth it exists, until now. The message. They're preparing for reverse translation of certain Sumerian tablets, long dismissed as poetic metaphor, contain this passage. When the last of the 9 has passed, the circle broken, the anchor stirs, and what was above shall kneel to what was below. Jefferson quoted this exact text in a private letter. He then wrote, "They think they're building a government. They're building a gate. The collapse protocol. They have a plan. They always have. It's called Operation Perseid, a series of directives stored not in military servers, but in private trust vaults across 3 banks. Its activation condition? If direct engagement occurs between anchor and vessel. Translated, if the thing beneath and the chosen president make contact, everything goes dark. Martial law, communications lockdown, new digital currency launch, emergency broadcast takeover. It's not a theory. The infrastructure already exists. It's just waiting for a signal. And that signal is being rehearsed. Why you're only hearing this now? Because the final witness just broke. A man embedded in the Capitol security archives for 19 years. He sent one message, encrypted, fragmented, terrified. They're not prepping for war. They're prepping for arrival. He's not the 47th. He's the first. So now you know the presidency was never real. The Constitution was a net. The Capitol was a vault. And 2025 is not an election. It's a summoning. And the only question left is, when it comes through, will it speak English? Or will it already be inside you?